The educator Dr. Maria Montessori once said,
The child developing harmoniously and the adult improving himself at his side make a very exciting and attractive picture.
"Welcome to Montessori Education with me, Jesse McCarthy, where we talk raising children and educating students while bettering ourselves right alongside them." So today is something unique. What you're about to hear is the opening section of Montessori Discipline, the course that answers the question, how do I get my child to listen? I hope you enjoy this peek into what I've created for all the wonderful moms and dads out there. And now, here we go. Hi everyone, Jesse McCarthy here. I'm going to start things off with a quick story about discipline from my own childhood. I don't recall exactly how old I was, but I couldn't have been more than 6 or 7. I was doing something stupid, like all kids will do now or then, and my dad was getting angry. He had already told me to stop a bunch of times, but of course I wasn't listening. And ironically enough, the more he kept at me, the more I just kept pushing. Eventually, after some yelling, he took off one of his shoes. Dockers, I remember that, and he hit me with it. Not super hard, but still. Now this was very rare for my dad, whom I loved deeply and who generally was a good guy. But the thing is, he just didn't know how to deal with me, or really how to deal with children. Now, fast forward about a decade to me as a teenager and to one of the last conversations I had with him, as he died young, unfortunately, from cancer. We were arguing, but this time it was because he wasn't listening to me, and I was getting on his case about it. So basically, I had become my dad. You know, someone's not listening to you, so you just get louder. Back then, I surely didn't know how to listen or how to handle conflict, just as my dad didn't really know how to listen or how to handle me. We both just kept repeating bad behavior. And this despite that neither of us particularly enjoyed these little battles. I mean, who does, right? Who likes being frustrated with someone they love? And this is especially true for parents. What dad out there just can't wait to nag his son? Or what mom enjoys yelling at her daughter? What parent looks forward to losing their cool? Yet, sometimes, despite our best intentions, we fall right into this trap. We nag, we yell, we get to the end of our rope, and afterward, we don't feel too good about it. And sadly, we can potentially pass this cycle down to our kids. That is not fun. That is definitely ungood, and for everyone involved, young and old. So to combat this, what I'm going to be sharing in this overall course is a different way of dealing with things. A unique approach to discipline, which is founded in Montessori and really works wonders. It gets children to actually listen by choice and without us nagging or yelling, and definitely without spanking or hitting. And more than that, it ensures you feel less stress and less guilt as a result. Now, I've seen it all with parents and teachers, as over the last 15 plus years, I've worked with literally thousands of children from infancy all the way into high school. For example, I headed a behavior issues team that got all the problems that no one really knew how to handle, including me early on. And one thing I've learned since, firsthand and for certain, is that the old carrot and stick approach to discipline does not work, even if it might seem like it does in the moment. For ultimately, it just leads to a big mess. But having said that, I've also seen that the pendulum swing by many parents today to the opposite side, to a kind of pampering and overindulgence of children can lead to just as big of a mess. So instead of either becoming, the traditional dictator dad or the modern pushover mom, or vice versa, we'll be talking something much different. Something that is infinitely more effective and also feels infinitely better. Again, for both children and us. Now, I'm not a fan of talking abstract up front, so I'm going to get right into a real example of a child not listening and how you can handle such a problem like a pro, or like a boss, as a former older student of mine used to jokingly put it. So the example will be from a parent of an almost 3-year-old who keeps playing with a sprinkler despite being told not to. Now, I've chosen this example to start off, Not because water play is uniquely interesting or something, it really isn't, but because the situation can be applied to all kinds of other discipline problems you might be facing, from food battles in the early morning to putting away toys at the end of the night and everything else in between. So with this background out of the way, let's hop into the sprinkler. Over the summer, I visited my friend Greg, who lives just outside Nashville, Tennessee. He and his wife, Jen, recently purchased a beautiful home out there after moving from a small townhouse in Chicago. They have 2 children, one nearly 3 and the other almost 6, both of whom attend Montessori. Occasionally when we're together around their kids, like on this trip, Greg will ask me for some input or feedback. Something like, is there anything you think I could have done differently there to have avoided that struggle? Now, on a side note, if you're like, wow, a friend is asking you to critique his parenting, then yeah, Greg is a pretty unique individual. Just such an open guy, always trying to improve and grow at everything, really. So he was asking me for some guidance. Interestingly, he was also wondering why at Montessori school his children are so, quote, well-behaved, but at home they at times can get rowdy and not listen to him and Jen. Now that question might sound familiar to some of you as well. Anyway, that's a little parent-child context for this sprinkler discipline problem I'm going to get into now, which Greg was happy for me to share. I just want to throw that out there. So one day while I was visiting their home and Greg and Jen were preparing dinner for the kids and all of us, I decided to go sit on their porch and read. It was just a beautiful day for it, mid-80s, slight breeze blowing, and I also kind of wanted to get out of their way in the kitchen. As I'm heading outside, one of their kids decides to join me, the younger one, Gavin, again, almost 3 years old. He wants to play while I read. I'm good with that. Now, when we get outside, he grabs this cool little scooter of his and starts riding around the sidewalk, just having a good old time. After a few minutes, though, he stops as he eyes the front yard sprinklers. Now, this isn't some sophisticated sprinkler system or anything. It's literally one of those big sprinkler heads that attaches to a hose for watering the lawn. Well, Gavin decides he's going to play with the sprinkler. So he turns on the water and starts going at it. Seems pretty harmless to me, at least at this point. Though I did learn later that Gavin knows he's not supposed to be playing with a sprinkler right now. Anyway, after a little while, he starts to soak himself with this thing. And eventually, not just himself, but also the neighbor's car. Now, Greg happens to come outside right about then and sees what's going on. The first thing he says is, "Hey, Gavin, we have to turn off the sprinkler." So he's starting off with the kindness, right? So I have a question for you. What do you think Gavin says to his dad here? Nothing. He literally says nothing and just keeps playing with the sprinkler. Maybe this kind of thing sounds familiar to some of you. So what does Greg do? He repeats himself, this time with a little more force and frustration. "Gavin, I said you need to put away that sprinkler. You know you cannot play with it before dinner." So Gavin, this time, does say something, but it is not what Dad wants to hear. No, I want the water. I'm playing." So at this point, Greg walks over, turns the connected hose off, and puts the sprinkler by the side of the house. He's not super angry. He's just done. But now, Gavin is not too happy. He's got a kind of sad face on him. And he isn't throwing a fit or anything or, having a tantrum. He's not there, at least not yet. He's just kind of looking unhappy. And Greg, who you can tell is feeling a little guilty, maybe for getting loud, tells Gavin, "I'll go grab you some dry clothes. I'll be right back." And then he leaves. What do you think Gavin does then? Yeah, he goes right back to that sprinkler. He turns the water on and he's back at it again. But this time, the neighbor happens to walk out, just as Gavin is spraying his car again. So now the neighbor starts trying to get Gavin to stop using his kind of sweetest neighborly voice. Hey, buddy, I can't have you spraying my car like that. Incidentally, it's just how wonderful, I'm just thinking back to it, that I'm just the guest in this kind of situation, rocking on my peaceful rocking chair, enjoying the beautiful weather, not having to be the one to deal with any of it. It's such a free feeling, you know? But on a serious, related note, my vantage at that moment, so think maybe the uninvolved outsider's view, is usually light years away emotionally from the highly involved parent's view. And because of that, I have an advantage and would most likely be able to handle the situation with more calm. But I want to note briefly, just kind of as a teaser for what's to come, that even if you're the parent in this situation, so say you're Greg, you can gain a lot of that mindset advantage yourself. Now, I'm not going to be getting into this perspective or mindset point in this intro, as we'll cover it later in the course, but it's a big part of becoming a master of discipline, of really being with your child without getting triggered by them. In these kind of moments, the most effective parents I've worked with are able to gain altitude or a broader perspective about the problem, in front of them. Kind of like you're seeing your troubles from a distance, way up on a plane, maybe even while relaxing with a drink, versus being on the ground knee deep in some big hot mess. So whenever you're facing a potentially stressful challenge with your child, you want to try to get above the problem, see it from a different angle. In a word, you're going to get altitude. That will always aid the situation. But again, much more on this later in the course. For now, let's get back to the nitty-gritty of this sprinkler situation. So if you recall, at this point, Greg is inside getting some dry clothes while the neighbor is trying to coax Gavin into not spraying his car anymore. Now, about a minute goes by, I'd say, and Greg comes back out and sees what's happening. You can tell at this point, beyond being a bit more frustrated, he is also a bit embarrassed. Now, who wouldn't be, right? So he's like, I'm so sorry, Jim, or whatever the neighbor's name was. And with no warning, Greg then picks up his soaked son while at the same time trying to grab the sprinkler and turn off the water. And he finally gets Gavin inside with arms and legs flailing all along the way. So basically at this point, we got a full-on tantrum. In all, no one is happy. Not Gavin, not Greg, not neighbor Jim, no one. So that's the sprinkler story in a nutshell, or at least the problem portion of it. So what do you think happened here? Like, what went wrong? And more importantly, next time around, how can Greg, or possibly you with your own child in your own situation, ensure things go right? In workshops I give, I normally have attendees do some personal work with this problem, like right now, before I say any more. But in this intro, we're just going to go straight to the solution. Later, I will definitely set aside time for you to actually think through such issues, as it's so important that you attempt a solution for yourself, not just be a passive listener. There's that old cliche line about learning, tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn. Well, not only is that very Montessori, it's also very true. So we will have a lot of that back and forth. Here, though, we're going to skip straight to how Greg could have used a different approach, Montessori Discipline, to better handle the sprinkler situation with Gavin. And more broadly, how you can apply the lessons to a problem or problems you might currently be having at home with your own son or daughter. First, I want to just remind everyone that there's a real quick way to handle things here. Think back to my dad and the Docker shoe. And I'm serious, Greg could spank or hit Gavin or do some angry yelling. That might actually, do the trick, or at least seemingly so in the moment. But again, we don't want short-range solutions, especially if they're teaching, the false idea that hitting or yelling solves problems, or that it's good to just follow whatever you tell them, without question. As you probably know well, children absorb everything we say and do. And I don't think blind obedience is a lesson we want them to be taking in. So here's Maria Montessori on this overall point, ironically enough from her book called The Absorbent Mind. Quote, "In our system, we obviously have a different concept of discipline. The discipline that we are looking for is active. We do not believe that one is disciplined only when he is artificially made as silent as a mute and as motionless as a paralytic. Such a one is not disciplined, but annihilated." End of quote. She's tough. She is tough. So although Greg would no doubt like Gavin to listen to him in the moment, I mean, I think most sane parents would too in this sprinkler situation. He doesn't want that to be at the expense of Gavin's developing independence. Or put in a simpler way, he's not trying to help raise a future yes man. And I'm assuming the same is true for you with your own son or daughter. I mean, you want them to listen, yeah, but you also don't want them to become a follower. Now, there's a lot more to discuss on this topic, and later we will cover how to match our immediate wishes and desires for children with our long-range goals and aspirations for them. But I just wanted to give you a quick sense of the deeper content we'll be getting into. Because ultimately, discipline from a Montessori perspective is about self-discipline, helping your child to eventually choose to make the right decision. And that's even when we're not around. So with that in mind, let's tackle the problem Greg faced at the beginning. The first time Greg walked outside, he found a soaked Gavin playing with the sprinkler. And if you recall, this was before Greg had said anything to him. But we also learned that Gavin was not supposed to be playing with the sprinkler right then. So to start, and this takes a lot of patience, which has to be built up on your end as a parent, of course, we got to take a moment to just breathe and simply look at what is happening in front of us. That's versus what we might feel is happening. So if we can separate out our strong emotions from what we objectively observe, we'll see that maybe this isn't some devil or monster child trying to ruin dinner, but rather just a happy little boy playing with some water. I don't know about you, but from a distance, that sounds like a lot of fun. It's a hot day, you're like 3 years old. Who wouldn't want a carefree run through a sprinkler? I mean, I want that now and I'm almost 40. So before we take any action, we have to try our best to get into the child's shoes. And if and when we can do that, we will already be in a much better place right off the bat. So after observing the situation with a little less of our own baggage, let's say we start to really empathize with Gavin, internally. Then we could walk over to him and begin the conversation by acknowledging what he's probably feeling. Wow, Gavin, it looks like you're having a lot of fun with the water here, and you're soaking wet. I know this kind of acknowledging emotions thing can be very hard for some and feel super unnatural if you've never done it. But I'll tell you, you start with this and you do it genuinely. I mean, you feel it for real. Then you might find you have a totally different child in front of you than the one you're used to. You could really surprise him in a positive way, as maybe he's expecting you just to nag or give him some long lecture about why it's bad to play with a sprinkler right now. Instead, though, he gets your childlike understanding. I mean, boy, with that, he might be like, yeah, Dad, the water's a lot of fun. Do you want to play too? Now, for others of you, the technique of acknowledging emotions might already be in your parent tool belt, but it's just not working. And if that's you, no worries. Later in the course, we'll be discussing why that might be the case and what you can do about it. But let's say at this point, you've observed the situation and effectively related to Gavin emotionally. Does that mean all of a sudden he's just going to listen to whatever you say? I mean, of course not, but it's a start. Next, now that you have some mutual connection, you can begin to offer what in Montessori is sometimes called freedom within limits. So, Gavin, I know you're having fun in the water here, and man, I would almost like to jump in there with you. We have to get ready for dinner. Here, you're mentioning a definite limit. It's coming on dinner time. But you're also treating Gavin with respect by not just ordering him around. Incidentally, even if Gavin here might not yet have the ability to get ready for dinner on his own, kind of like us adults, you're talking to him as if he's capable. And that will go a long way in your relationship. I mean, one reason so many teenagers don't talk to their parents about their problems is they've had a lifetime of being treated like a baby. But let's say Greg's different here. You're different here. And you've got a respectful but definite limit. We have to get ready for dinner. Now you need to offer some freedom within that, which at Gavin's age might mean 2 or possibly 3 choices. I'm going to go with 3 as I'm fairly confident he can handle that. So Greg could say, Gavin, we'll be able to come out for some sprinkler time tomorrow. Now, though, we have dinner. So here are 3 choices. 1, would you like to help me put away the sprinkler and then we'll walk inside together to get ready? Or 2, I'll put the sprinkler away and then we'll walk inside together to get ready. Or 3, I'll put the sprinkler away and I'll carry you inside to get ready. Which would you like? Now, I don't know which Gavin would have chosen initially. I don't know what your child would choose in such a situation. But the point here is that it will be his or her choice. And all 3 choices he might make are okay. I mean, we'd love for it to be the first, the child happily putting away the sprinkler and then the both of us just merrily holding hands as we stroll inside together. But we are totally prepared for it to be the 3rd choice, our doing the work and having to potentially carry inside a crying child. Now, to be as real as possible here, especially since this is the first time Greg would be doing this overall approach, let's say Gavin chooses that 3rd option. So what do you do then? You go put away the sprinkler and carry Gavin inside. That's it. Now, depending on your child's mood and maybe on how much sleep he or she has gotten, this might go one of 2 ways. They're going to love being carried by you, or they're going to flip out. Either way, though, you follow through. And also either way, if done right, and you truly are feeling how your child might be feeling, really trying to be in his or her shoes, and I'd suggest literally getting down to their level when you're talking, I can almost promise you that things will go far better than otherwise. For instance, whatever the outcome, doing this is better than nagging. Because if you keep that up, do you know when it will end? Never. And I mean that, you will continue to nag your child when they are literally out of the house as an adult. You don't want to be that parent. Now, I'm raising the worst case scenario here because I want to be as real as possible. Montessori discipline does not work overnight, and basically it never works the first time. But if you implement this approach consistently across situations, so obviously not just with water play, but also with eating battles, or putting away toys, not hitting a sibling, and on, Gavin or your own child will eventually choose the most responsible option, which, wild enough, isn't even on your list of choices. You see, the most responsible option is not misusing the sprinklers to begin with. And I'm talking without having to be reminded. That's the ultimate result right there of this kind of caring yet firm approach. In a word, self-discipline. Now, if we back up for a moment and quickly look at what this Montessori discipline approach actually consists of, at root, it's really just 3 things. First, observation. We try to look at the situation, including the child, in as calmly, as clear-headedly as possible. This can be hard, no doubt, as at times our judgment can get all sorts of clouded. As one Montessori educator put it, quote, "Many people, when they're observing young children, react from what they feel about what they see rather than what they see," end of quote. So we have to separate out fact from fiction here, be as objective as possible. There's actually a complete section in the course on observation, and that will include a very practical exercise on how to observe like a pro. I don't just want to be like, observe, and send you out there. Now, after the first step, so of observing, we try to get ourselves into the child's shoes, feel what he or she feels. This allows us to genuinely acknowledge their emotions, what they're actually experiencing. Which, incidentally, again, I got to tell you, as a young child, even as an older child really, it is thrilling to know that your dad or your mom or some other adult feels what you feel inside. It's almost magical. We know this ourselves sometimes, even as grown-ups, when somebody really gets us, it feels good. So acknowledging emotions is huge. Then finally, after observing and showing some empathy, you offer freedom within limits. As the late child psychologist Haim Ginott once put it, sounding very similar to Maria Montessori, quote, "Give children a choice and a voice in matters that affect their lives. Children are dependent on their parents, and dependency breeds hostility. To reduce enmity, a parent provides children with opportunities to experience independence," end of quote. So overall, we have observation, acknowledging emotions, and freedom within limits. Now I'm telling you, this is the killer combination. It's like the holy trinity of discipline. You get these right, and you will be singing hallelujah. For real. But it's not easy. And that's why the bulk of this course will be practice implementing them, as well as some of the obstacles that can get in the way of success, like lack of consistency or following through. So, for instance, say you use Montessori discipline in a sprinkler-like situation, but later, come bedtime and your child's not listening, you turn into angry, yelling mom or dad. You're going to have problems. Or if you so caringly and thoughtfully use this approach at night, but then come morning, you turn into pushover parent. Oh, I guess so, honey. You can have a bowl of ice cream for breakfast. Then you're going to have problems. So consistency is key. And we will work on that a lot. We'll cover a bunch of examples across ages and in all sorts of situations, from a child not putting away toys, to biting, cutting, hitting, to inevitable food battles, and to what many parents of young children fear most, tantrums in public places. So we'll cover it all. Related, there are a few important points that I'm only just touching on here, but that we'll discuss in depth later, such as how can we connect to children's natural, and in my opinion, awesome motivation to be like us, to want to do grown-up work. Like take this sprinkler situation. On another day, with a little bit of creativity, Gavin can easily transform into your landscaper helper or your neighbor's assistant car washer instead of being a kind of pest. So basically, how to turn seemingly negative situations into really positive ones and for everyone involved. And I'm not talking fluff stuff here, but meaningful real world ideas to apply ASAP. And then there's also the biggie section we'll get to on how to handle our own strong emotions when things aren't so peachy and lovely. When all you can see is the negative, when the frustration is just, it's all encompassing like a cloud over you. So we'll be talking about how to rise out of a rut. And everyone gets in a rut at times. Crazy enough, even Maria Montessori could get worked up. A few years ago, I found this gem of a line in one of her books. She said, quote, "I have myself sometimes been too severe with a child," end of quote. So the question is not if you'll get frustrated with your child. That's a given. It's rather when you get frustrated, what will you do about it? So we're going to answer that question so that you know exactly what to do for success. There's a lot to come, and I'm glad and thankful you will be here for it. I promise, if you take this course seriously, if you do the work and put into practice what you learn throughout, you will become a master at discipline in the Montessori way. That is, you will be able to get your own child to listen by choice. All right, with that, let us hop into our next section. So what you just heard was the intro of Montessori Discipline. I hope this peek into the course has given you some ideas to apply at home with your own son or daughter or both, or maybe you got half a dozen children, not sure. If you want to learn more though, or enroll in the full course, follow the link in the show notes or visit montessorieducation.com and click Montessori Discipline. And with that, cheers to everyone out there, and I will see some of you in the course.